everyone, welcome to yet another informative video from SImplilearn. In today's competitive job market, having a solid understanding of SQL or structured query language is essential, especially if you are aiming for roles that involve handling data. SQL is a standard language used to manage and analyze data in various industries. It not only allows you to efficiently work with large data sets, but also empowers you to derive valuable insights crucial for making informed business decisions. As businesses increasingly prioritize data-driven strategies, the demand for SQL proficiency continues to rise. In this video, we have covered from beginners to advanced level questions that you can definitely expect in your SQL interview, ensuring you're well equipped to succeed in your career.
Craving a career upgrade? Subscribe, like, and comment below. Dive into the link in the description to fast-track your ambitions. Whether you're making a switch or aiming higher, SImplilearn has your back.
And if you want to become a SQL certified, so here is a quick info for you. Try SQL certification course by SImplilearn. This SQL certification course gives you all the information you need to successfully start working with SQL databases and make use of the database in your applications. Learn how to correctly structure your database, author efficient SQL statements and clauses, and manage your SQL database for scalable growth. This course is open to anyone interested in learning SQL. No prior experience in programming or databases is required. It is ideal for beginners and those looking to enhance their database management skills. Check out the course link from the description box and pinned comments. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, let's start with the first question. What is SQL? SQL stands for Structured Query Language. It's a programming language used to manage and manipulate databases. With SQL, you can query, update, insert, and delete data in a database. Imagine it as a librarian who knows where every book in a library is. When you need information, you ask the librarian and they fetch it for you. Similarly, with SQL, you write queries to get the data you need from a database. For example, to find all the customers in a database who live in New York, you'd write, select star from customers where city is equal to New York. Now this is a query. So this command tells the database to find all the records in the customers table, where the city is New York. SQL is essential because it provides a consistent way to interact with relational databases which store data in structured tables. Now, the second question is, what is a database? Now, a database is an organized collection of data stored electronically. Think of it as a digital filing cabinet where you can store and retrieve information quickly. Managed by database management systems or DBMS. Databases allow you to use SQL to interact with data. For example, an online bookstore uses a database to keep track of books, authors, customers, and orders. So tables like books, customers, and orders store all the necessary information. SQL queries help the bookstore to find in-stock books, top customers, or total sales easily. Now let's move on to the next question. What is DDL, or Data Definition Language? So DDL primarily stands for Data Definition Language, which is a subset of SQL that deals with the management of database structures. It includes commands for defining and modifying the structure of database objects such as tables, indexes, and constraints. Now here are some key DDL commands. Create, which is used to create new database objects like tables, indexes, or views. The second one is alter, which modifies existing database objects such as adding, deleting, or modifying columns in a table. Next, we have drop, which deletes an entire database object such as a table or index. So DDL commands are crucial for database administrators and developers to manage the structure of databases effectively. They allow for the creation, modification, and deletion of database objects, ensuring the database remains organized and optimized for data storage and retrieval. Now let's move on to the next question, which is, what do you mean by DML or Data Manipulation Language? So data manipulation language is a subset of SQL used for managing data within database objects. So unlike data definition language, which focuses on defining database structures, DML deals with retrieving, inserting, updating, and deleting data stored in the database tables. So here are some key DML commands. The first one is select, which retrieves data from one or more tables based on specified criteria. Next, you have insert, which adds new rows of data into a table. Then you have update, which modifies existing data in a table. And at last, you have delete, which removes rows of data from a table. So DML commands are essential for applications to interact with and manipulate the data stored in databases. They allow users to perform tasks such as querying for specific information, adding new records, updating existing ones, and deleting unnecessary data. Now let's see what the fifth question is. What do you mean by a foreign key? So a foreign key in the context of databases is a column or a set of columns that establishes a link between two tables in a relational database. So it represents a relationship between two tables where the value in the foreign key column of one table matches a primary key value in another table. So this relationship helps enforce referential integrity between the tables, ensuring that every foreign key value points to an existing primary key value in the reference table. For example, consider two tables, orders and customers. So the orders table may have a column named customer ID, which is a foreign key referencing the customer ID column in the customers table. This foreign key relationship ensures that every customer ID in the orders table corresponds to a valid customer ID in the customers table, thereby maintaining consistency and integrity of the data. So now let's move on to the next question. What are table and field? So in the context of databases, a table is a fundamental structure in a relational database that organizes data into rows and columns. Each table represents a collection of relatable data entries. Table consists of columns and rows. Columns define the types of data that can be stored in each field, such as integers, strings, dates, etc. Tables are used to store and organize data in a structured manner, facilitating efficient data retrieval, manipulation, and storage. Now, a field, also referred to as a column, is a vertical element within a table that represents a specific attribute, a property of the data being stored. Each column in a table has a name and a data type that defines the kind of data it can hold, such as numbers, text, dates, or binary data. Fields are the building blocks of tables and define the structure of the data stored within the table. For example, consider students table. So in this example, student ID, first name, last name, date of birth, and grade are fields or columns within the students table, each storing specific information about each student record. Tables and fields are fundamental concepts in relational databases, allowing for efficient organization, storage, and retrieval of structured data. Now moving on to the seventh question, what is normalization? So normalization is a process of organizing data in a database efficiently to reduce redundancy and dependency. It involves breaking down large tables into smaller related tables and defining relationships between them. Now, the main goal of normalization are to minimize data redundancy, ensure data consistency, and improve data integrity. So, in simpler terms, normalization helps to structure data in such a way that avoids storing the same information multiple times and reduces the likelihood of errors or inconsistencies in the database. So, it typically involves dividing large tables into smaller ones and establishing relationships between them using keys, like primary key and foreign keys, to ensure data is stored logically and efficiently. Now, what is a query? So, a query is a command used to retrieve, update, or manipulate data stored in a database. It's written in a query language like SQL and specifies a criteria for selecting or modifying data according to the user's needs. For example, a simple query might retrieve all records from a table, while more complex queries can filter data based on specific conditions or perform calculations. Queries are essential for interacting with databases and retrieving meaningful information efficiently. Now let's move on to the ninth question, which is, what are the different operators available in SQL? SQL operators are special symbols or keywords used to perform operations on data. They can be categorized into several types. Let's go through them with examples. The first one is arithmetic operators, which perform mathematic operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Then you have comparison operators, which compare two values and return a Boolean result, which is equal, not equal, greater than, less than, and so on. Then you have logical operators, which combine multiple conditions, such as and, or, not. Then you have bitwise operators, which perform bit-level operations like bitwise and, bitwise or, etc. Then you have set operators, which combine results of two queries like union, union all, intersect, and except. And then you have other operators like between, in, is null, etc. So these were the operators in SQL. Now the 10th question is, what are user-defined functions in SQL? So user-defined functions, or UDFs, in SQL are custom functions created by users to perform specific tasks. Unlike built-in SQL functions, UDFs are tailored to meet particular requirements of your application or business logic. They can be used to encapsulate complex calculations or repetitive tasks, making your SQL code more modular and easier to maintain. Now, there are two types of UDFs, which the first one is scalar functions. So these functions return a single value, such as an integer, float, or string. Then you have table valued functions. These return a table, which can be used like a regular table in SQL queries. Now the next question is, what is an alias command in SQL? So an alias in SQL is a temporary name given to a table or a column in a SQL query. This helps to make your SQL queries more readable and easier to understand. So think of it as a nickname for a column or table that you use just for the duration of the query. So here's how you can use alias with columns and tables. Column alias. You use a column alias to rename a column in your query result. This is useful for making column names more readable or for when you want to rename columns in your output. So the query you can give is select first name as first, last name as last from employees. So in this query, first name is given the alias first and last name is given the alias last. So the result will show these aliases as the column headers. Now we have table aliases. You use a table alias to rename a table in your query. This is particularly useful in complex queries involving joins where it can help shorten the query and improve readability. So for example, you have this query. So in this following query, the employees is given the alias E and department is given the alias D. This makes the query shorter and easier to follow. So hope you understood this. Now let's move on to the next question, which is, what is ETL in SQL? So ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. So it's a process used in database management and data warehousing to move data from one or more sources to the destination system, usually a data warehouse or database, where it can be used for analysis and reporting. Let's break down each part of ETL. First one is extract. So this is the first step where data is extracted from various source systems. Then you have transform. So once the data is extracted, it needs to be transformed to fit the structure and format of the destination system. So this step can include cleaning the data, aggregating it, and performing calculations or conversions. And at last you have load, which is a final step, which is loading the transformed data into the target database or data warehouse. Now the next question is, how to copy tables in SQL? So copying tables in SQL is a common task. Whether you are duplicating data for backup purposes, testing, or creating a new table based on an existing one, there are a few methods to copy tables, and I'll guide you through the most straightforward ones with examples. So the select into statement is a simple way to copy the structure and data of a table into a new table. So for example, you can give this query. So this command creates a new table called new table with the same structure and data as existing table. Now, what are union, minus, and intersect commands? So these commands are used to combine the results of two or more queries in different ways. Let's dive in and understand each of them with examples. The first one is union. So the union command is used to combine the results of two or more select queries into a single result set. It removes duplicate rows between the combined results. So for example, this query combines the first names from the employees table and the customers table into a single list, removing any duplicates. Next, we have minus. So the minus command, also known as except command in some SQL dialects, is used to return the results from the first query that are not present in the second query. So for example, this query returns first names that are in the employees table but not in the customers table. Next, you have intersect. So the intersect command is used to return the common results from two or more select queries. It includes only the rows that are present in all queries. For example, this query returns first names that are present in both the employees table and the customers table. Now let's move on to the next question, which is, what is a SQL injection? So SQL injection is a code injection technique that attackers use to exploit vulnerabilities in an application software by injecting malicious SQL code. So this can allow attackers to read, modify, or even delete data in the database without proper authorization. So SQL injection typically happens when an application takes user input and inserts it directly into a SQL query without proper validation or sanitization. So let's look at an example to understand this better. So imagine you're having a simple login form where users enter their username and password. The application might use a SQL query like this to check the credentials. So if the application directly inserts user input into the query, an attacker could input something like the second query. So since 1 is equal to 1 is always true, the query returns all rows in the user's table, potentially giving the attacker access to the system without a valid password. Now, what is auto increment? So auto increment is a feature in SQL that automatically generates a unique number whenever a new record is inserted into a table. So this is particularly useful for creating primary keys where each record needs a unique identifier. So when you define a column with an auto increment attribute, the database automatically assigns a unique value to that column for each new row. The value usually starts at 1 and increments by 1 for each subsequent row, although you can customize the starting point and increment value. So let's look at a simple example to understand how auto increment works. So imagine you are creating a table to store information about employees. You want each employee to have a unique ID. So in this example, the employee ID column is a set to auto increment. This means that when you insert a new employees into the table, you don't need to specify the employee ID value. The database will handle it for you. Now the next question is, what is the default constraint? So the default constraint in SQL is used to provide a default value for a column when no value is specified during the insertion of a new record. So this helps ensure that your table always has meaningful data, even if some fields are left blank during data entry. So when you define a column with the default constraint, the database will automatically insert the specified default value if no other value is provided for that column. So let's look at an example to understand how the default constraint works. So imagine you are creating a table to store information about products and you want the default stock quantity to be 0 if not specified. So in this example, the stock quantity column is given a default constraint with a value of 0. This means that if you insert a new product without specifying the stock quantity, it will automatically be set to 0. Now let's move on to the next question. What is the difference between the between and in operators in SQL? So both between and in operators are used to filter query results based on certain conditions, but they serve different purposes and are used in different contexts. Let's break it down. The between operator is used to filter the result set within a certain range. It can be used with numbers, text, or dates. The range specified includes both the start and end values. So imagine you have a table called sales with a column sales amount. You want to find all sales that are between $100 and $500. So in this query, between filters the results to include only those records where the sales amount is between 100 and 500, inclusive. So in operator is used to filter the result set based on a list of specified values. It allows users to specify multiple values in a where clause. For example, let's say you have a customers table and you want to find customers who are from either New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago. So in this query, in filters the results to include only those records where the city is either New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago. Now let's move on to the 19th question. What is the difference between a primary key and unique constraints? So both primary key and unique constraints are used to ensure that data in a database remains unique, but they have distinct characteristics and uses. So let's explore each of them in detail. So a primary key is a constraint that uniquely identifies each record in a table. It's a column or a combination of columns that ensures all rows in the table are unique and not null. Then you have unique constraints. So a unique constraint also ensures that all values in a column or a set of columns are unique. However, unlike a primary key, a table can have multiple unique constraints, and columns with unique constraints can contain null values. Now, what is a join in SQL and what are the types of joins? So join in SQL is a way to combine rows from two or more tables based on a related column between them. Joins are used to fetch data from multiple tables and present it as a single result set. So there are several types of joins, each serving a specific purpose. Let's dive into the main types of joins with examples. Inner join. So an inner join returns only the rows where there is a match in both tables. Left outer join. So a left join returns all rows from the left table and the matched rows from the right table. So if no match is found, null values are returned for columns from the right table. Then you have right outer join. So a right join ensures all rows from the right table and the matched rows from the left table. If no match is found, null values are returned for columns from the left table. And at last you have full outer join. So a full join returns all rows when there is a match in either the left or right table. So if there is no match, null values are returned for columns where there is no match. Now the 21st question is, what is an index? So an index in a database is like a roadmap that helps quickly find specific information in a table. So normally data is stored in a specific order on a disk, making it efficient for sequential reading. However, when you need to find specific data quickly, like searching for different values, an index acts like a shortcut. So it's akin to having a quick reference guide that allows database to pinpoint relevant data without scanning every single entry. So this makes searches fast, similar to how a binary search operates. So although indexes require extra disk space and can slow down data writes, they greatly enhance retrieval speed for commonly accessed data. Now, what is the on-delete cascade constraint? So an on-delete cascade constraint in MySQL automates the deletion of related rows in a child table when corresponding rows in the parent table are deleted. So this ensures that all dependent records in the child tables are removed without requiring manual deletion, maintaining data integrity and simplifying database management. Now, what is a cursor? So a cursor in SQL is a temporary storage area allocated by database serving during DML operations like select, insert, update, or delete. So cursors allow you to process each row in a result set individually, making it useful for row-by-row data manipulation. So you declare a cursor with a query, open it to execute the query, fetch rows one at a time for processing, and close the cursor when done to release resources. So the next question is, what are the various types of relationships in SQL? So in SQL, relationships between tables are crucial for organizing and structuring data. Here are the different types of relationships. The first is one-to-one. So each row in table A is linked to one and only one row in table B, and vice versa. So example, a table of employees and a table of employee addresses, where each employee has one unique address. Now the next one is one-to-many. Here, each row in table A can be linked to multiple rows in table B, but each row in table B is linked to only one row in table A. For example, a table of departments and a table of employees, where each department has multiple employees, but each employee belongs to only one department. Now the next one is many-to-one. So it is a reverse of one-to-many, where each row in table B can be linked to multiple rows in table A. So for example, multiple employees can be linked to one department. And the last one is many-to-many. So each row in table A can be linked to multiple rows in table B, and each row in table B can be linked to multiple rows in table A. For example, a table of students and a table of courses, where each student can enroll in multiple courses and each course can have multiple students. So these relationships help maintain data integrity and facilitate complex queries by properly structuring how tables interact with each other. Now the 25th question is, what is the difference between SQL delete and SQL truncate commands? So the delete and truncate commands in SQL are used to remove data from tables, but they operate differently and have different implications. SQL delete removes specific rows from a table based on a condition. SQL truncate removes all rows from a table, resetting the table to an empty state. Now, what is the difference between cluster and non-cluster index? Clustered index. A clustered index reorders the way records are physically stored in a table based on the indexed columns. There can only be one clustered index per table. It organizes data rows in tables based on the indexed columns. It changes the physical order of the table data to match the index order. So typically, it's used on columns that are frequently used for range queries, example, where, order by, etc. Now, a non-clustered index does not change the physical order or the table rows and creates a separate structure for the fast data retrieval. So multiple non-clustered indexes can exist on a single table. Does not affect the physical order of the table data. It stores index entries separately from the actual data rows. So it is typically used for columns that are frequently used in join, where, and order by clauses. Now the next question is, what is a live log? So live log happens when multiple processes are actively running but are stuck in a repetitive cycle of interaction. So each process responds to changes initiated by others, causing a loop where no meaningful progress is made. So unlike a deadlock where processes are all waiting for resources, in live log processes remain active and continue to react to each other without achieving any productive outcome. This can occur in concurrent systems where processes are trying to coordinate actions but end up in a state where their actions hinder each other's progress, leading to a persistent loop of interactions. Now the next question is, Name different types of case manipulation functions available in SQL. So these are the three useful functions in SQL for manipulating the case of strings. The first one is lower. The lower function is used to convert a string into a lowercase letter. It accepts a string as inputs and returns the same string with all characters converted to lowercase. For example, if you have a string hello world, applying lowercase, it would result in a smaller case hello world. Now next we have uppercase. So conversely, the uppercase function converts a string into uppercase letters. It also takes a string as input and returns a string with all characters converted to uppercase. And the last one is initCap. The initCap function is used to capitalize the first letter of each word in a string while converting all other letters to lowercase. So this function is handy for formatting names or titles. So these functions are helpful for standardizing text data or formatting it according to specific requirements in SQL queries. Now the next question is, what are local and global variables? So local variables are declared within a specific scope, such as within a function or a block of code. So they exist only within that scope and cannot be accessed or modified from outside it. So local variables are typically used to store temporary data or values that are only needed for a specific task or computation within that particular scope. So once the scope of the function or block ends, the local variables are usually destroyed or no longer accessible. Now the global variables, on the other hand, are declared outside of any specific function or block and can be accessed and modified from anywhere within the program or script. They have a wider scope and persist throughout the entire execution of the program. Global variables are useful for storing values that need to be accessed by multiple functions or parts of the code. However, excessive use of global variables can lead to potential issues like accidental overwriting of values or difficulty in debugging. Now coming to the 30th question, name the function which is used to remove spaces in the end of a string. So in SQL, the trim function is used to remove spaces or other specified characters from the beginning and end of a string. It helps clean up data by eliminating unnecessary white space that might affect the comparisons or display. The syntax for trim is straightforward. You provide the string inside the parenthesis and SQL will trim any leading and trailing spaces for default. Now, what is the difference between truncate and drop statements? The truncate statement quickly removes all rows from a table. It deletes data while keeping the table structure, indexes, and permissions intact. Now, the drop statement completely removes a table from the database. It deletes the table structure along with all its data, indexes, constraints, and permissions. Now, so define SQL order by. So order by arranges fetch data based on specified columns, defaulting to ascending order. But by adding DESC command, you can reverse the order for highest to lowest prices. So it's a simple yet essential feature for organizing data exactly as needed in SQL queries. Now, explain SQL halving statement. So the halving clause in SQL is used to filter data based on conditions for group results or aggregate functions used in select statement. Unlike the where clause, which filters rows before grouping, halving filters rows after data has been grouped together. This means you can use halving to apply conditions to summarize data, like finding groups with a total sum about a certain value or averages that meet specific criteria. It's important to remember that aggregate functions like sum, count, average can only be used with halving, not with where. This helps SQL manage and analyze data effectively, whether you are looking at individual rows or group results. Now the next question is, explain SQL AND OR statement. In SQL, the AND statement combines conditions where both must be true for a row to be included. For example, this query retrieves employees older than 25 who work in the IT department. Now, the OR statement is used when at least one condition must be true. For instance, this query retrieves products in either the electronics or clothing category. Both statements allow for flexible data filtering based on specific criteria in SQL queries. Now let's move on to the next question, which is, why do we use commit and rollback commands? We use commit in SQL to finalize and permanently save changes made by a transaction, ensuring they are visible to other users or applications. And rollback is used to undo changes if a transaction encounters an error or needs to be cancelled, reverting the database to its previous state. So these commands are essential for managing transactional integrity and ensuring data consistency in SQL databases. Now let's see what the next question is. What are asset properties? So asset properties are a set of 4 essential characteristics that guarantee the reliability and consistency of transactions in a database system. So the first one is atomicity. It ensures that all operations within a transaction are treated as a single unit. So either all operations are successfully completed, or if any operation fails, the entire transaction is rolled back to maintain data integrity. The second one is consistency. Ensures that only valid data is committed to the database. Transactions take the database from one valid state to another. Constraints, triggers, and validations are applied to ensure data consistency. I stands for isolation. It ensures that the execution of transactions concurrently does not interfere with each other. Each transaction is isolated from others until it completes, preventing them from accessing uncommitted changes. And the D stands for durability. Ensures that once a transaction is committed, its changes are permanent and survive system failures. The changes are stored in non-volatile memory disk and remain intact even in case of power loss or system crash. Now the next question is, are null values the same as 0 or a blank space? So no, a null value in SQL are not the same as 0 or a blank space. So null represents a missing or unknown value in a database column. It indicates that the value for that particular record is undefined or not applicable. It is distinct from 0 or an empty string. 0 represents a numerical value that is explicitly defined as a number 0. It is a numeric value and not the same as null. Now, blank space or empty string represents an absence of characters in a string field. It is different from null, which is specifically used to denote the absence of any value, including numeric or other data types. Moving on to the next question, what is the need for group functions in SQL? In database management, group functions, also referred to as aggregate functions, are used to process multiple rows of data together based on specific criteria, resulting in a single meaningful value. These functions operate across groups of rows rather than individual rows, allowing for calculations and summaries at a higher level of abstraction. So various group functions are, the first one is count function. So it calculates a number of rows that meet the specified criteria, such as counting the number of orders placed by customers. The next one is sum function. It adds together the numeric values in a column for all rows that meet the criteria, like totaling the sales revenue for a specific period. And then you have the average function, which computes the average value of a numeric column across all selected rows, useful for finding the average salary of employees. The next you have min function. It retrieves the minimum value from a column for the selected rows, such as finding the earliest date in a transaction history. And then you have the max function, which retrieves the maximum value from a column for the selected rows. For example, identifying the highest sales figure achieved in a month. Now the next question is, how can you fetch common records from two tables? So when we have data spread across different tables in a database and want to retrieve information that relates across these tables, we use the join statement. This SQL feature lets us specify which columns from each table we want to include in our query results. Now the next question is, how do we avoid getting duplicate entries in a query without using the distinct keyword? So when dealing with SQL queries, the distinct keyword serves to filter out duplicate rows from the result set. So while useful, it can sometimes impact query performance because it requires the database engine to sort and compare the result set to eliminate duplicates. So alternatively, there are several methods to remove duplicates efficiently. The first one is using row numbers. So by assigning new row numbers to each row partition by the columns that define uniqueness, you can filter out duplicates by selecting rows where the row number is 1. The next is using self-join. So joining a table to itself based on a columns that define uniqueness allows you to filter out duplicate entries, selecting only those rows where corresponding values match. And then by using group by. So grouping rows based on columns that define uniqueness and aggregating the results helps in eliminating duplicates, as each group represents a unique combination of values. Now the next question is, what is the difference between a coalesce and is-null function? So the coalesce function returns the first non-null expression from its arguments. This means if you have multiple expressions separated by commas, this function will evaluate them in order and return the first non-null value. If all expressions are null, then the function returns null. Now in SQL Server, the is-null function serves a different purpose. It replaces null values with a specified replacement value. Now the next question is, what's the difference between rows and range? So rows specifies the window frame based on a physical number of rows before and after the current row. And the range defines the window frame based on rows with the same values as the current row. This is useful when your data is ordered by values that can have duplicates. Now the next question is, what is a CTE, also known as common table expression, and how is it different from a subquery? So a common table expression, or CTE, is a temporary result set that you can reference within a select, insert, update or delete statement. It is defined using the with clause and is easier to read and maintain compared to subqueries. So unlike subqueries, CTEs can be self-referential and recursive, which allows for more complex query. Moving on to the next question, explain the difference between cross-join and full outer join. So cross-join produces a Cartesian product of two tables, meaning each row from the first table is combined with each row from the second table. And the full outer join returns all records when there is a match in either the left or right table. It combines the results of both left join and right join. Now, as the 45th question, we have, what are Windows functions? So Windows function performs a calculation across a set of rows related to current row. Unlike aggregate functions, they do not cause rows to become grouped into a single output row. Common window functions include row number of, rank of, and dense rank of. So this is how the query will look like. Now, what is the difference between the rank of and dense rank of functions? So a rank of function assigns ranks to rows within a partition with gaps in the ranking sequence when there are ties. And the dense rank of assigns ranks to rows within a partition without gaps in the ranking sequence when there are ties. How do you perform a recursive query in SQL? Recursive queries are performed using recursive CTEs. They are defined using the with clause and include a union all to combine the anchor member and the recursive member. So this is how a recursive query looks like. Now, as the next question we have, write a query to find the top 5 customers with the highest total order amounts. So this is your query. Now this SQL query selects the customer ID and calculates the sum of order amount for each customer from the orders table. Now it then groups the results by customer ID using group by, ensuring each customer's total order amount is aggregated. The order by total order amount DESC arranges these totals in descending order, placing the customers with the highest order amounts at the top. Finally, the limit 5 restricts the output to only the top 5 customers with the highest total order amounts. Now, how can you optimize a slow running query? So there are several techniques including use appropriate indexes. Indexes help retrieve the data faster by organizing it efficiently. Second, avoid unnecessary joins and subqueries. Simplify your queries to minimize the amount of data processed. Third, use efficient functions and operators. Choose functions and operators that perform tasks with minimal overhead. And then analyze execution plans. Review query execution plans to identify and address performance bottlenecks effectively. Moving on to the last question, what is a partitioned table and why would you use it? So a partitioned table is a large table divided into smaller, more manageable pieces called partitions. So partitioning improves performance and manageability, especially for large data sets, by allowing queries to scan only relevant partitions rather than the entire table. For example, this SQL statement creates a table named sales with columns sale ID of type int, sale date of type date, and amount of type decimal 10 to. It partitions the table sales based on the sale date column using range partitioning. Two partitions, which is P0 and P1, are defined. So P0 includes values less than 2022-0101 and P1 includes values less than 2023-0101. This setup allows data in the sales table to be divided into separate partitions based on the data ranges. So there you have it. As we conclude the video on SQL interview questions and answers, we hope you found the insights and explanations valuable for your preparation. Mastering SQL is key to excelling in data-related roles, and understanding these common interview questions will boost your confidence during interviews. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing to our channel for more tutorials and tips on mastering SQL and advancing your career in data. Don't forget to like and share this video with others who might benefit from it. Thank you.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the SImplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.